Good afternoon. It's December 12th, 2024. Um, I wish I would have been able to get more news and information out to you earlier, but I was working. There's a bunch of things going on. So I'm starting with a couple of analysis videos via Judge Napolitano's channel. I follow his channel. He has wonderful experts on there. I highly suggest that you follow his channel. I'm just going to play a bit of this, which has to do with what's going on in Syria, what this new terrorist government, what may happen, what things could happen, where this could lead to. I'm going to start with Larry Johnson. He's a former CIA intel analyst. I'm just playing certain parts, but they're giving their views on what's going on and what could happen and who's involved. So I'm going to play a little bit so you can get an idea what's going on.
So, Jelani, now the head of what passes for the government in Syria, or at least the head of the principal terrorist group that toppled Assad, still has a bounty.
What is this weird new wearable gadget, and why is it quickly becoming the most popular Christmas gift?
Once it became clear that Assad wasn't going to listen, Russia wasn't about to go in and break to China and have to take responsibility for it. Unlike Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, at least the Russians understood that
it skipped back a little bit.
If you break it, you buy it.
But it's okay. It's just about it where I need it to be.
So, Jelani, now the head of what passes for the government in Syria, or at least the head of the principal terrorist group that toppled Assad, still has a bounty on his head offered by the State Department. Now, I've asked this of all of our colleagues, they're also your friends, this morning. So the same government that's offering a bounty to capture this guy is funding his fighters.
Right. Yeah, that's it. And not only funding his fighters, we're funding the people that we claim carried out the attack on us on 9/11. Okay? And it's just, they are ideologically not only in sync, more extreme than the crowd that surrounded bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. So, yeah, we play this double game, and we think we're really cute about it. Well, how has it turned out in Libya? Libya hasn't become an island of peace and stability. And so what we're doing is we're increasingly destabilizing different areas of the world. And I think that message is starting to resonate in Moscow and in Tehran in a way that, they recognize you no longer can deal with the United States in normal diplomatic measures. You have to you have to do other things.
There are people sitting in American federal prisons who are convicted of providing material assistance to terrorist organizations.
Right.
And the government itself does that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And look, we haven't just done it with HTS. And this just didn't start this year or last year. Remember, that was one of the purposes and functions of the so-called consulate, the CIA base that was in Benghazi, that was attacked in 2012. That base was set up with a specific mission of collecting weapons from the fallen Libyan ruler and then processing them, getting them cleaned up, prepped, shipping them on to Turkey, at which point the Turks would then take them and give them to, we said they're given to the Syrian Free Army, but the reality was they were going to these Islamic extremists, Sunnis, which, the Turks are Sunni in their outlook. And so from the standpoint of Recep Erdogan, this is just a way to maybe try to recapture some of the glory of the Ottoman Empire.
Help me to understand the neocon mentality, Larry, that mentality that pervades the deep state, the State Department, no matter who's in the Oval Office. In their minds, why are they celebrating?
Oh,
how does this advance American national security? What moral basis is there for Joe Biden to be applauding the overthrow of Assad and his replacement with a guy that cuts people's heads off?
It doesn't do a thing for U.S. national security. What it does in their mind is it helps ensure Israel's security, because eliminating Syria is going to make it more difficult for Iran to provide support to Hezbollah. All of this is on the assumption that Hezbollah's existence and capabilities are entirely dependent upon Iran. I don't believe that's the case. But, look, this is not the first time from the neocons' perspective, and frankly, the Israeli, I call it the Zionist perspective, that they'll climb into bed with terrorists. It was right shortly after the formation of Hamas in 1987, Mossad started funneling money to Hamas via Qatar in order to strengthen Hamas, make them a player, put them in a position where they could even carry out terrorist attacks. All of this was in order to provide a counterweight to Fatah and the PLO. And so it was a very cynical use where they would they would get in bed with the terrorists. And frankly, go back to 1980, 81, when Israel was arming Iran after the Ayatollah Khomeini came in. So it is, if people are thinking that this is a black and white issue where the good guys with the white hats are always standing firm against terrorism and all those evil people supporting terrorists, well, it's blackish gray when it comes to both Israel and the United States. They've got more of a track record of supporting terrorists and engaging in terrorism than they do opposing terrorism. That's
a very important point. What Larry's been talking about in the history of us working, cultivating these terrorist groups. And I just wanted you all to hear it from an expert on these issues. We've been working with terrorists for decades. And we were working with them before 9/11. We were working with them in the 80s. I think it goes all the way back to like 1979. It's the same with the Israeli state. But they have, ever since their inception, and I mean, if you really want to learn the history, the true history, you need to dig into that and find out what was going on there. Let me see here.
Sad fact.
How is Iran harmed by the overthrow of Assad?
Well, Assad, nothing else, it contributes to this image that, okay, Iran's increasingly isolated, which they're not, because of their growing role in BRICS, and they're calculating how to respond to the last Israeli attack. They've held off so far. Candidly, I listened to Scott earlier, and I disagree with him with respect to what Iran's going to do with.
Yes, well, Scott Ritter also talked on Judge Napolitano's show before Larry came on later that day. Scott was saying that he thought that Iran was going to go back into the nuclear program and try to make amends, try to work diplomatically with the U.S. And I didn't agree. I didn't think that was the smart thing for Iran to do. And here, I agree with Larry on this. Listen to what he says.
Nuclear weapons. I think Iran will have now drawn the conclusion, based upon what has happened to Syria, that Iran has no alternative but to obtain nuclear weapons. That's the only guarantee a country has that it will not be attacked by the United States.
Exactly.
Every country that doesn't have nuclear weapons has been attacked. Doesn't matter if you got chemical weapons, but if you got a nuclear weapon, the United States backs away because they don't want to run that risk. I would not be surprised to see Iran make that decision now. They've held off on it because they sort of harbored in the back of their mind, hey, maybe we can cut a deal with the West. Maybe we can make the West like us. And, no, that's not going to happen. They don't understand. The West has fixed itself, the United States, the American people, have fixed themselves on this notion that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism. And here's the irony, Judge. I can take you back to the State Department Bureau of Counterterrorism. Look at their statistics. They start reporting for the year 2017. That's the year Hayat Tahrir al-Sham came out. HTS. HTS has been listed in the top 10 terrorist groups in the world since 2017. How about Iran? Not on the list. Not a single group that's on that list is sponsored by Iran. Yet the United States persists with this lie. And the lie is based upon Iranian support to Hezbollah and Hamas. And frankly, what Hezbollah has been doing, they're fighting to recover territory that they believe is theirs.
What does Hezbollah do now?
Well, they're waiting. They're going to see how long. The ceasefire is really not holding. But I do not think Hezbollah is in a situation where they're going to curl up in a fetal position and go away. They like to pretend that there's this great control now over Syria. The smuggling that goes on there goes back centuries. So they're going to be able to get weapons and resupply. They're going to be somewhat isolated initially, but I don't think Iran's going to cut them loose. And at the same time, you've had the Saudis continue to express support for Hezbollah and the people of Palestine in terms of what they're fighting against, in terms of the genocide, the Israeli genocide. So that's why I say this is not going to be a neat, clean wrap-up where, Hezbollah is going to give up, Hamas is going to surrender, Israel's going to be at peace, and, the angels will be singing, birds will be chirping. Not going to happen.
So, it's important to hear that from an expert that has understanding of the region, common sense, is not giving propaganda like our intel agencies and government officials, Pentagon, well, I don't know about Pentagon, but probably Pentagon, Sullivan, all those people. The deep state, the military-industrial complex, all of that always give you the same thing. Iran is the biggest terrorist we've ever had. Like I've said, Iran is not the biggest terrorist, and they're not even on the terrorist watch list. Nobody knows that. Why? Because if you're only getting mainstream, state-run media, then you're not going to know this. This is part of the thing that I was playing for you from Larry. Now I'm going to play Colonel McGregor. He came on Judge Napolitano's show as well. And I want you to hear what he has to say about the region. He's, retired U.S. Army. He knows a lot about how things happen in that region. I think he was in the Gulf War way back. So listen to what he has to say.
Here is the president of Syria, President Assad, before he was deposed. This is in 2017, saying very similar to what you said, that the United States does not want partners, it only wants puppets. The key part to what he says, this is about 60 seconds long, the key part to what he says, with which I suspect you'll agree, is at the very end. Chris, number 13.
The problem in the United States is about the whole political system. It's not about one.
Hold on.
With coals, I have...
Sorry about that.
Because the Israelis can shut off their water supply. They're not anxious to end up like Gaza.
Let's went back a little bit.
Egypt's a little different now. And the Egyptian population there is very angry. We should come back to that, because what happens in Egypt is very important, and you could see something similar to what has happened in Syria happen in Egypt.
Here's the president of Syria, President Assad, before he was deposed. This is in 2017, saying very similar to what you said, that the United States does not want partners, it only wants puppets. The key part to what he says, this is about 60 seconds long, the key part to what he says, with which I suspect you'll agree, is at the very end. Chris, number 13.
The problem in the United States is about the whole political system. It's not about one person. Trump's election has proven again for us, again and again, that the president is only a performer. He's not the decision maker. He's part of different lobbies and the deep state, or the deep regime, as we can call it, who implement and dictate on the president what should he be doing. And the proof to what I'm saying, that Trump, after he became president, he swallowed most of the promises and the word that he was boosting during his campaign. He made 180 turn in nearly every promise. So why? Because the deep state wouldn't allow him to go in certain direction. That's why, for me, dealing with him as a person, it could be, but can that person deliver? No. In the United States, president cannot deliver. The whole state, the deep state only, is the one who can deliver. And this is the problem. This deep state doesn't accept partners around the world. They only accept puppets. They only accept followers. They only accept proxies. That's what they accept. We're not any of these.
He's gone, of course, but I think he had a good handle on the influence of the deep state in foreign affairs, don't you?
Well, he's repeating essentially what President Putin has said and others have said over the years. And in his case, he tried to evade becoming a puppet or being removed through the arrangements that the Russians, Iranians, and Turks made in Sochi and Astana. And these were agreements that were designed to essentially freeze the ceasefire after ISIS and its offspring and affiliates, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, and so forth, had been defeated back in the teens. He thought this would last. Obviously, it didn't. It was never a perfect outcome because there was a Kurdish state emerging in the northeast of Syria, and the Turks had moved into and occupied a portion of northern Syria and then created, under Erdogan, this enclave of radical Islamists, essentially the survivors of ISIS, and nurtured them over the years and prepared them for what they're doing now. We've also done the same thing in the enclave that we control over on the border with Iraq. We've repurposed many of the same people, roughly 11,000 of them. And about 17, 18,000 more were under Erdogan. And of course, Mossad was involved with the CIA and MI6 in the equipping and training. But the principal job of coaching the Islamists collectively in how to do it and where to go and what to do is really President Erdogan.
The funding that the United States through the CIA and other intelligence services supplied, did it make its way to al-Jilani, who has a $10 million bounty on his head because he cuts the heads of other people off?
Well, I rather suspect so, and I don't think he's terribly worried about the bounty at this point because obviously we are his allies.
Right.
We are 100% aligned with them, and what you're seeing, and this is where we really ought to spend some time, people need to understand that we're watching something that we have not seen yet in the 21st century. We've seen it in the 20th century and earlier in European history, which is a formal partition of a third country by at least two other partners, maybe more, and that's Syria. It has an uncanny resemblance to the partitions of Poland in 1795 and the partitions of Poland later on again in 1939. Between 1795 and 1939, in both cases, the Polish state vanished and only came back later as a consequence of new powers emerging and demands made by the new winners of the Second World War. What we see in Syria is something similar. And we already know that the Israelis have forces on the outskirts of Damascus. And we know from the map that President Netanyahu held up in front of the UN when he spoke to it, showed effectively his Greater Israel plan. And the Greater Israel document includes the lower half of Syria, much of Jordan, and reaches all the way over into Egypt as well as most of Lebanon. And this is very real now. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when things were going very, very badly in southern Lebanon as well as in Gaza, people lost sight of this. But this has been cooking for some time. We have ultimately had a great deal to do with organizing this. And of course, Mr. Erdogan has made no secret of his Ottoman aspirations or ambitions. He's got maps floating around on Turkish television that show Greece and Bulgaria as part of Turkey, along with most of the Caucasus, parts of northern Iran, and most of Syria and most of northern Iraq. So these are two states with two leaders right now, Netanyahu and Erdogan, who are determined to realize their dreams. And we have simply said, go for it. The problem with all of this is you've unleashed a tiger, at least two tigers, and you don't know where this is all going to end up. And that's why people in Egypt are now very uneasy about the potential for the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt to become another disciple of Erdogan in this great game. And we don't know what could possibly happen in Jordan and how long we will tolerate that state under anybody other than Israeli direction. And now if you move to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, they are genuinely fearful. And they're not probably going to want to bet very heavily on any guarantees that we give them. It's a very strange situation. It's something nobody expected to see. We have always listened to people with aspirations and show us maps with new territory, but now these aspirations are realities, and the realities are dangerous for the entire region and potentially, depending upon how the rest of the world acts, to the world.
Well, this is a very important part, what he just said, because he's talking about the Netanyahu and the whole state of Israel wanting to expand. The greater Israel plan that's been around since the 70s, and I think it was 79, but I can't remember. But it was in the 70s, and yeah, they're ecstatic, when the cheery. Oh yeah, we're going to take over all of these areas, and at the same time you have Turkey have their own aspirations, as he said. Let's rebuild the Ottoman Empire, which let's not forget that for 400 years, my Greek Orthodox Christians and the Byzantium Empire and all that were under the Ottomans and were oppressed, and our bishops and priests were hung on gates and posts and everything. So I obviously am not excited or in favor of the resurrecting any kind of Ottoman Empire. And so, but you have two of these pretty powerful, only because they're in alliance with, at least Israel's in alliance with us, and that's the only reason it has any power, because it uses all of our weapons. And I don't see how that's going to go over really well, because both of them have already started to try to take over territory. Turkey's trying to get rid of the Kurds and all this. And I'm trying to figure out where this is in this portion, but there's a portion where Colonel McGregor was talking about that part of the areas that Erdogan wants to make Ottoman again was Greece and Bulgaria, which are both Orthodox Christian countries. And there's been a horrible, historically, the relationship between Greece and Turkey has been very contentious, very horrible. In the 1920s, I think it was early 1920s, there was the terrible genocide of there was the Armenian genocide, there was the genocide, or there was the massive killings of Syrian Christians, Pontic Greeks in that area. They called it the Turks tried to call it the population exchange. They weren't. They were death marches. I read a book on a Greek family from there at that time, and it was just horrific. I cried reading it. The Turks came into the village there in Pontic, Greece area, and the bishop there, the Greek Orthodox bishop there, was with his parishioners that were left there. They hadn't fled, and he stood there with his people, and some of them, they would hide in the church. They would. The parishioners would hide in the churches to try to have some safety, and the Turks would just burn the whole churches up with them inside. And then there was the time when the bishop, they approached the bishop, and the bishop blessed him with his hand. It's a blessing that they do, and one of the Turkish soldiers just chopped his hand right off, and then eventually they ended up killing, I think, him. In any case, I don't see how that's going to work. And as they have said, you can't control these people, especially these terrorists running around, especially in different groups. I've heard there's, they've always fought amongst each other, so we don't know how that's going to work out. And Colonel McGregor also said that, and I'm going to play a little bit more, but he said that Israel is backing Azerbaijan, I think, the one that's been in battles over the years and even recently with Armenia. Armenia is an Orthodox country under the Oriental Orthodox. And you see that Israel is arming and helping the Turks and Azerbaijan because the Turks give oil to Israel. So they have this somewhat, the transactional relationship. But you see, Israel does not care for Christians. I think people need to understand that the Israeli government does not care for Christians. I hope that at some point you're going to get that it's going to sink in. I say this because I was a blind follower of Israel from all of my adult life until around 2010. And that was when like I said, when I left the Republican Party, I was just getting really close to my church. And, well, what happened was I learned a lot of things about the history of the Israeli state. And it made me so upset and so angry. And I'm also the child of a military father, so I was angry of the things that happened in that at that instance as well. So let me play a little bit more here, see if I can get to some of this that I'm trying to get to.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is being cross-examined in a criminal case in which he is the defendant accused of bribery. In Tel Aviv, is his IDF actually stealing land that 2 weeks ago was part of Syria?
Well, I don't think they have to conquer much. They launched a furious air campaign over the last 72 hours to destroy virtually everything that had any military value on the ground in Syria. And I think that was also part of the broader plan to pay off all of the senior officers in the Syrian army to back down and turn everything over to them. That was very successful in terms of destroying what was there. That doesn't mean, though, that the Islamist hordes that are running wild across Syria don't have other sources of equipment and ammunition. They do. It's called Turkey. And the Turkish military is moving cautiously behind them. The Turkish military intelligence officers are forward. They're seeing what's happening. They're reporting. And again, Erdogan is coaching. We think they're probably going to kill at least 100,000 people if they haven't already done it in Syria. But Erdogan has coached them and say, don't kill everybody. Avoid villages that are Christian, avoid certain areas. We don't want to awaken the West to what's happening. And ultimately, I think that'll be the end of the Christian community in Syria. And probably inevitably what's left of it in Iraq, unless the Shiites in Iraq can protect them as they have in the past.
Okay, there's an important thing. He just says in passing, or in his statement here, in his response. Oh, unless the Shia can protect them as they have in the past. I say this because people don't realize, because again, Iran are Shia, and they've tried to, the propaganda over like the past 50 years has been that Iran is, or at least 40 to 50 years, Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism. That is completely false. And as you can see, as I have said before, I have to look to Iran and Russia to protect Christians in Syria and, in Palestine. And they're not all doing that for just that. I'm sure they have their reasons, okay? But the point is, he talks about this, and I say this because I have a family member that just thinks that everybody over in the Middle East are she doesn't understand, and she thinks everybody over in the Middle East, all the Arabs are terrorists, and that's not the case. They're very different from each other. They're not. They have their own little customs and all that. They have their own beliefs. They have their own histories. So, with that information, he says that Colonel McGregor says that. And this is why I thought it was important that Erdogan wants those areas. And he wants Armenia gone. He wants the Kurds gone. However, part of St. Paisios' prophecy, I will play a little bit of it, talks about what happens with the Kurds and Armenia. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of that. There's no sound because it's just kind of weird music, but I'll show you because you have to read the... Let's see. I'll read it for you. At another point, Elder Paisios spoke. When the Turkish fleet will start to head against Greece and reach at 6 miles, it will indeed be destroyed. This is the time that they will have the boiled wheat in their belts. But this is the beginning. This is God's will, as Amelia will be the beginning of the end. This will commence all the events leading up to get back to Hagia Sophia. The city will be given to us. There will be, but they think they'll win, but they will be their destruction. The Russians will eventually win, and the city will fall into their hands. Then we will get it back. The Russians will have to give it to us. He explained to some other pilgrims. The Turks will be destroyed and be erased from the maps forever. The 1/3 of the Turks will go from where they have started in the depths of, and the other third will be saved because it will be Christianized, and the last 1/3 will be killed in this war. Turkey will be dismembered into 3 to 4 parts. The countdown has already begun. We will get back our territories, the Greeks, and Armenians and Kurds as well. So, in St. Paisius' prophecies, which he got from St. Cosmas of Anatolia, which was years ago, but St. Paisius is a Greek Orthodox, a monk, who's a saint now, who died in 1992 or 94. I think it was 94. And I think he was speaking in 1992 about this, as he was concerned about his country and of Greece. And here he shares this information of why Erdogan, or whoever's after him, I don't know when this war is actually, I mean, it seems so close. Obviously, his big plan isn't going to take place according to this prophecy. So I wanted to share that with you. And I know this is a long video, but I felt that there was a lot of things to discuss and for people to understand. You know, I've been following these experts on these, and I can at least explain where I get my thoughts from. And I listen to a lot of these experts on, and you know, they're very good at what they do. So, and they're not bought off, and they're not part of the deep state. So I have other videos to do. Thank you for watching. If you like my content, please follow my channel and like my videos if you like them. Thank you, and talk to you soon.